I was standing at my kitchen window when the lockbox appeared on my front door. It was a Tuesday morning in late October, the kind of cold that comes off Lake Ontario before the leaves have finished falling. I had my hands wrapped around my ceramic mug, the one Robert made for me in the pottery class he took the winter before he died. Glazed in the color he called lake blue, and I watched a man in a dark parka attach something to the door of the house I have lived in for 31 years. I did not move. I did not go outside. I stood very still, with the warmth of that mug against both palms. And I thought, my son put that there, and then I thought about what the realtor was going to find when she made that first call. Not to Marcus. To me. My name is Eleanor Marsh. I am 71 years old. And live in Kingston, Ontario, in a house on Maplehurst Drive that my late husband, Robert, and I bought when Marcus was 4 years old, and the neighborhood still had an apple orchard at the end of the street. I taught grade 5 and 6 at Barrage Public School for 34 years. I retired in 2018 with a pension, a party in the gymnasium, and a card signed by more children than I could count, many of them now grown with children of their own. Robert died of a stroke in the spring of 2012. He was 63. He had been healthy, or we thought he had been. He was gone in 11 days. Marcus was 26, and living in Toronto by then. And I finished raising myself, which is a strange thing to say, but the truest way I know to say it. I am the kind of woman who handles things. When the furnace failed the winter after Robert died, I called the repairman myself, paid the bill myself, and told no one because there was no one who needed to know. When my hip needed replacing in 2019, I arranged the surgery, the rehabilitation, the grocery delivery, and my own transportation to physiotherapy, without asking Marcus for a single day of his time. Not because I was proud, because I had learned that depending on people is something you do carefully, and only when you are certain of the ground beneath you. That habit of handling things alone served me for a long time. It is also, I understand now, the thing that made what happened possible. Marcus's wife, Sienna, is 34 years old and works as a marketing director for a tech firm in Toronto. When I say she is sharp, I mean it without irony. She can read a room in 30 seconds. She is organized in the way that people are organized when they have decided that disorder is a personal failure. She keeps a color-coded calendar, and she never forgets a detail, which is a quality I genuinely admired. I remember the first Christmas after they married, 4 years ago now. Sienna had organized the entire dinner, the seating, the food, the centerpiece, a beautiful arrangement of cedar and white candles that smelled like the north. Robert's old armchair was still at the head of the table, end of the living room, and Sienna had put a wrapped gift on it, one for each of us, so that the chair looked like it was participating. I thought that was kind. I thought, this woman sees things. Robert would have liked her, I told myself. He had always appreciated people who brought their full selves into a room. The first small thing I noticed was at that same Christmas, actually, after dinner, when I went to put my mug on the shelf where I kept it, the shelf Robert had built for me himself. A small pine shelf beside the kitchen window. I found that Sienna had moved several things to make room for a basket of decorative soaps she'd brought. The mug was sitting on the counter. It was nothing. I moved it back. I said nothing. I told myself she hadn't known about the shelf. That was reasonable. That was fair. 8 months later, Marcus called on a Sunday evening. He said, "Mom, I have to be honest with you. Sienna's been offered a position in Kingston. We've been thinking, and with the housing market the way it is in the city, we thought, what if we moved in with you for a year? Just until we find something? You've got the space, and honestly, it would be good for you not to be alone." I stood in my kitchen. I looked at Robert's armchair in the living room. I looked at the shelf beside the window. I said, "1 year, Marcus. And I keep my routines." He said, "Of course, Mom, it's your house." I agreed because it was my son. I agreed because the house has 4 bedrooms, and I use one. I agreed because Robert would have said yes without thinking twice. And because some part of me did want to hear footsteps in the morning again. I want to be honest about that. My yes was real. I want you to understand that they moved in on the 1st of March. By the end of the first week, the dish rack had been replaced. Sienna said the old one was rusting, which was true. She replaced it with a sleek black one that sat at a different angle and blocked part of the window light. I noticed it. I said nothing. By the middle of March, the coffee had changed. I drink dark roast. I have drunk dark roast since 1987. Sienna bought a subscription for a lighter blend, and the bag was in the cabinet above the machine. And my coffee was moved below the counter in a basket with some other things she'd grouped together, as not used daily. I stood in front of that basket the first morning I found it, still in my house code, and I thought, I use this daily. I thought it clearly. I took my coffee from the basket, and said nothing aloud. In April, they moved my writing desk. I kept a small writing desk in the alcove at the top of the stairs. It had been there since 1994. Robert had found it at an estate sale in Napanee. I wrote my letters there. I still write letters. To 3 friends, and 2 former students, and I kept my address book and my stationery in the top drawer. Sienna had decided the alcove would make a better office nook for her remote work, and the desk had been moved to the spare room with the door closed. I went to Marcus's about that one. I said, I'd like my desk back in the alcove. He said, Mom, Sienna really needs that space for her calls. You can still use the desk. It's just in the other room. I heard what he wasn't saying. I went back to my bedroom and sat on the edge of my bed in the afternoon light, and I told myself, it is still your desk. This is still your house. I was training myself. I realize now, to accept less, and call it enough. In May, I came downstairs one morning to find that Robert's armchair had been moved from its place by the window to the corner behind the television. Sienna was rearranging for a flow that made sense. She told me. She had not asked me. The chair was still in the room, technically, but it was behind something else, tucked away, as though it had agreed to be less visible. I moved it back that afternoon, while they were both out. I moved it back without a word to either of them, and I stood beside it with my hand on the armrest for a moment, before I let go. In June, Sienna told me she had enrolled me in a chair yoga class on Tuesday mornings because, she said, it would be so good for your hip, Eleanor, and honestly, you'd have something to do. I had not asked for something to do. I had a garden. I had my letters. I had a book club on the second Thursday of every month. But I was being scheduled now, and the scheduling was presented as care, which made it difficult to refuse without seeming ungrateful. The Tuesday class conflicted with my book club. I went to the book club anyway, and said nothing about the yoga class to Sienna. The moment of clarity came in late July, on an evening that was still and warm, the kind that Kingston gets in midsummer, when the light goes golden at 7 o'clock. I came downstairs to find Robert's armchair, gone from the living room entirely. Sienna said they had put it in the basement because they were having friends over on the weekend and needed the space. She said it with complete reasonableness. She said it the way you say something to someone who does not need to be consulted. I looked at the empty space by the window, where that chair had been. I did not say anything. Something inside me, which had been soft and accommodating for 5 months, became very still. Not angry, still, the way water becomes before it freezes. A door, somewhere internal, closed with a quiet click that only I could hear. I went to the kitchen and I put the kettle on. I set my lake blue mug on the shelf Robert built. I looked at my hands. I thought about what Robert would have seen from where he sat in that chair, for years, every evening. The window, the street, the oak tree we planted together when Marcus started school. I thought, this is my home. I thought it like a fact that I had forgotten, and was remembering now. I thought it without heat, without drama. I thought it like a woman picking up something she had set down too long ago. The next morning, I drove to my bank on Princess Street before Marcus and Sienna were awake. I had given Marcus limited access to my account 3 years earlier. For practical reasons, to help me pay bills during my hip surgery, to manage transfers when I needed it. I had never closed that arrangement because I had never thought I needed to. I thought about that on the drive. I kept both hands on the wheel. At the bank, I sat across from a young woman named Priya, and I explained calmly that I needed to remove my son's access from my primary account and review the recent transactions. My voice was steady. My hands, in my lap, were not entirely steady. That is the truth of it. But I looked at the numbers on the screen, and I kept my voice level, and I did what needed to be done. There had been 3 transfers I had not authorized. Not large, but mine, taken without asking. I also called my lawyer's office from the parking lot. I have used the same lawyer for 20 years. I left a message saying I needed to review my will and my power of attorney at the earliest appointment available. Then I drove to my friend Pauline's house on Sydenham Street, and I sat at her kitchen table and told her everything while she made us tea. I did not cry until I mentioned the armchair. I drove home feeling not victorious, lighter, emptied out in the way that is actually relief. Marcus found out on a Friday. He did not find out because I told him. He found out because he went online to check an account balance and found that his access had been removed. And when he called the number, he reached an automated system that confirmed the change had been made by the account holder. He called me. He said, "Mom, what did you do? I need you to explain what you did." I said, "I've reviewed my accounts, Marcus. Everything is in order." He said, "You removed me. You removed me from your account without even talking to me. Do you know how that feels? Do you have any idea?" I did not say what I was thinking. I was thinking, you moved your father's chair into the basement without talking to me. You took money from my account without talking to me. You scheduled my Tuesday mornings without talking to me. But I did not say any of it. I said, "I think it's better this way." He said, "Sienna thinks you've never accepted her. She thinks this is about her." I let that sit. I said nothing else. 2 days later, I received a text from Sienna. It said, "Eleanor, I have tried to be a good daughter-in-law, and I hope you know how hurtful this has been. We are family, and family trusts each other." I read it twice. I set the phone face down on Robert's shelf, then Marcus told me what they had really been planning. They had contacted a realtor, not to browse, not to dream. Marcus told me, during a phone call that I received on a Wednesday morning, that they had been discussing whether the house might be better, his word, better sold, and the money used to find me something more suitable. He said, "Mom, you are 71. This house is a lot of house for one person." He said, "We thought maybe a seniors community. Something where you'd have support. Where you wouldn't be so isolated." He said it, I want you to understand, with complete sincerity. He was not pretending to care. He believed this was care. That is the most complicated part of all of it. I said, "No one is selling this house." "Marcus," he said, "we're just exploring options." "Mom, nothing is decided." What he did not know, because I had not told him, was that I had already spoken to my lawyer. The power of attorney had been revoked and rewritten. And the realtor, a woman named Sandra, who had been practicing in Kingston for 20 years, had already received a call, not from Marcus, from me. I had called her before he did, as it turned out. A friend of Pauline's had mentioned her name. I called her to introduce myself and to confirm, in straightforward language, that I am the sole owner of the property at my address, that I am competent, that I am not planning to sell, and that if she received any inquiry about the property from anyone other than me, she should know the full context. Sandra was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "Mrs. Marsh, I appreciate you calling. I did receive an inquiry about your property this week. I was about to reach out to you directly." That was the conversation Marcus did not know had happened when he told me. They were exploring options. That was what the lockbox on the door cost him. Sandra called him the same day. I do not know exactly what she said. I know that the lockbox was gone by the following morning. I will not tell you it did not hurt. The weeks after that phone call were the quietest I have spent in a long time. Marcus and Sienna moved into a rental apartment before the end of August. It was their choice. I did not ask them to go. But the atmosphere in the house had changed in a way that none of us knew how to live inside. I missed Marcus. I want to be precise about that. Not a version of Marcus, not a theoretical son. The specific man who used to call me on Sunday evenings and talk about nothing in particular for 20 minutes. I missed that there were 2 nights when I sat in Robert's armchair. I had brought it back up from the basement myself, which took longer than I expected, and left me winded on the stairs. And I thought about calling Marcus and telling him that we could start over, that it didn't matter, that family is worth more than being right. What stopped me was not anger. What stopped me was the memory of looking at that lockbox on my door, and understanding that this had not been a misunderstanding. It had been a plan. Pauline brought dinner one Thursday in September, roast chicken and a lemon tart. We ate at my kitchen table, and I told her I was tired in a way that wasn't about sleep. She said, "Eleanor, you outlasted harder things than this." I looked at my lake blue mug on the shelf. I thought, yes, I have by November. 3 months had passed. Marcus called on a Sunday, which he had not done since August. The call was brief. He said he wanted to apologize. He did not say for everything, and he did not go into particulars. And it was not the conversation I might have wanted in a different version of this story. But it was real. I could hear that it was real, he said. I don't think I saw what was happening clearly. I said, I know. We talked for 12 minutes. It was not easy. It was a beginning. Sienna has not called. I do not expect her to. But Marcus came for coffee in December, alone. And he sat in Robert's armchair by the window. The chair was where it belonged by then. The light coming in at the right angle on a winter afternoon, and we talked about Robert, which we had not done together in years. He looked at the chair, then at me, and he said quietly, I'm sorry about the chair. Mom? I handed him his coffee and I said, I know. The lake blue mug was on its shelf. The writing desk was back in the alcove. The pine shelf held what I had always kept on it. The house was my house again. Not loudly. Just as a fact that had been restored. If any part of this story sounds like something you have lived, or are living, I want to say something directly to you. This is a story about a house. It is also a story about everything a house can mean. The life you built inside it. The person who helped you build it. The version of yourself that is present in every room. Because you have been present in every room, for decades. When someone begins to erase those things, the chair, the shelf, the coffee, the Tuesday morning, they may not be doing it out of cruelty. Sometimes they are doing it out of carelessness. Sometimes out of efficiency. Sometimes, as in my case, out of a belief that they know better than you do, what your life should look like. None of those reasons give them the right. The thing I want you to understand is this. I did not fight for a chair. I did not fight for a shelf, or a coffee brand, or a desk in an alcove. I fought for the evidence that I had lived. That I am still living. That the woman who built this home has not vacated the premises simply because she has gotten older. If you are sitting somewhere, right now, and the space around you no longer looks like you. If your things have been moved, your routines rearranged, your opinions folded gently into the category of things that no longer need to be consulted, then I want you to know that I understand, and I want you to know what I learned in a bank parking lot on a morning in August. With slightly unsteady hands and a completely level voice, you are allowed to be exactly where you have always been. A house remembers who belongs in it. And so do you. Insert after I was training myself, I realize now. To accept less and call it enough. Before the July evening scene, there was also the matter of my garden. I have kept a garden on the south side of the house since 1997. Nothing elaborate. Tomatoes. Herbs. 2 rows of dahlias that Robert bought me the summer Marcus started high school. And a climbing rose on the fence that has been there so long it has become structural. Every May, I turn the beds myself. Every August, I bring tomatoes inside and set them on the windowsill in the kitchen to finish ripening in the sun. In late June, I came outside to find that a patio furniture set had been placed across half the garden bed. 4 chairs and a table, still in the plastic wrapping from the store. Sienna said they had needed somewhere to put it while Marcus assembled the base. And the garden bed had seemed like the logical spot because the ground was soft. 2 of the dahlia stems were broken. I stood there in my garden shoes, looking at the plastic chairs sitting on top of 30 years of careful tending. And I felt something I did not have an immediate word for. It was not rage. It was closer to vertigo, as though the ground itself had confirmed something I had been reluctant to name. I moved the chairs myself. It took 4 trips. My hip ached on the 3rd trip, but I finished. I said nothing. I replanted the dahlia stems. 1 survived. The other died in single quotes, due by early July. I noticed that guests had begun arriving at the house without my knowledge. Not 1 or 2 people, actual dinner parties. On Friday evenings, I would come downstairs in my housecoat at 7 o'clock, to find 4 people I did not know sitting at my dining room table with wine glasses, and a charcuterie board from the specialty shop on Princess Street. Sienna would introduce me pleasantly, the way you introduce someone who has wandered in from another room. I would smile. I would go back upstairs. I ate dinner alone in my bedroom on 3 separate Fridays in July. I want to be careful when I say that, because I know how it sounds, and I do not want you to hear it as something dramatic. It was not dramatic. It was just a woman eating reheated soup from a tray, in her own bedroom, in her own house, while strangers laughed in her dining room below. It was quiet. That is what made it so effective as a method of reduction.